Do you ever wonder how successful entrepreneurs built their businesses from scratch? Are you unsure if starting a business is for you? Well, tune in as we discuss how successful entrepreneurs transformed their ideas into reality. Welcome back to From Zero to Revenue with your host, Chris Yap.
Welcome back. You are listening to the podcast show From Zero to Revenue, the show that features the journey of successful entrepreneurs and professionals from around the world. I'm your host, Chris Yap. Today, we are here to discuss how a perfect example of this pandemic has prompted businesses to be creative and attack the problem head on. I'd like to thank our sponsor, GapTech Global, your outsourcing company for LinkedIn marketing and various back office services. You can learn more about their services at gaptechglobal.com. I'm excited to have our guest here today, the Chief Revenue Officer of ServRX, Mr. Breck. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Chris. What a pleasure.
Absolutely. I'm really excited for this event or this specific episode. But first of all, this is another excellent testimony of how powerful LinkedIn is. I reached out to you via LinkedIn, and here we are today in the show. So I'm just amazed by how powerful LinkedIn really is.
Yeah, we have gotten a lot of traction on LinkedIn. We do spend a lot of time there and have a digital marketing manager that creates great content for us, and that gets us a lot of views, and we are able to meet awesome people like you.
Thanks so much, Breck. So I've seen your innovation firsthand. You know, I actually had the privilege to see your demo. But please tell us a little bit about ServRX and what are you guys up to?
Yeah, so ServRX is a revenue cycle management company, so we're a third-party payer for community pharmacies. So for almost 2 decades now, I've been helping community pharmacies and specifically workers' compensation patients. So workers' compensation is a pretty unique program that isn't predetermined. And so once somebody gets hurt on the job, they don't have an automatic enrollment card that they can go take to a pharmacy to get the prescriptions they need. So we fill that gap. We help those patients get their medication same day without any hassle, without any delays. If they had to wait until it all became on file and the carriers like Liberty Mutual or Hartford or whoever were notified that they now have somebody with an injury, it could be 3 or 4 days. So if somebody's in pain or if they need antibiotics, they can't wait for 4 days to get those medications. So we step in as a third-party payer, allow the pharmacy to go ahead and dispense the medication. We pay the pharmacy up front. So we take the risk so they don't have to, so they can move on to taking care of the next patient. So we want to get those patients well and back to work as soon as possible.
Awesome. And I know, Breck, ServRX has a new program as well, kind of, addressing the concerns of the pandemic. We will touch on that in a little bit. But Breck, being the revenue guy, tell us a little bit about your background, personal background, and career-wise as well.
Yeah, be happy to. So I was going to school in Intermountain West, went to University of Utah for most of my undergrad and was kind of spinning my wheels and needed to finish my career. So I actually moved over to University of Phoenix. Now, back in those days, I'm a lot older than you, Chris. Back in those days, they were in the classroom. It wasn't an online program. So I finished up my undergrad and my master's degree. So I just plowed straight through and got an executive MBA at the University of Phoenix in, like I said, in the classroom. While I was doing my MBA, I had run across a friend that I knew from my undergraduate program who was in a convenience store gas station, Amoco station, American Oil station. I was like, what are you doing? He's like, hey, it kind of looks funny. I know should be in our big careers. He says, but this is the greatest gig ever. They're paying for my master's degree or a big portion of it. I said, where do I sign up? It's pretty expensive to do an MBA, an executive MBA. So I joined Amoco, American Oil Company, and was working full time, going to school full time, averaging maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night.
Yeah.
Sometimes no sleep at all.
Sure.
Right after graduation, I was accepting a big promotion with American Oil to move out to Chicago. And that very same week that we were listing our home, another acquaintance of mine was walking through the neighborhood. He was picking up house flyers. And I said, David, come on in here. You don't need to pick up those flyers. I'll just sell you my house, And we got visiting. And he said, well, can I come tell you about something that I'm working on? And I said, yeah, sure. Come on over. So the very next day he came over and he started telling me about this really cool technology that he was working on. And he kept saying, we could do this and we could do that. And I'm like, what's this we stuff? I'm taking a promotion and moving to Chicago. Well, we did start a company. We did a startup technology company. It was digital manipulation. And that's kind of how I got into technology, was with that first venture of Trilogy Studios. Really fun project. Unfortunately, the directors didn't think it was that fun, and they didn't like that we were manipulating movie content, and so we were not able to complete the project and continue on. But that had gotten me a lot of media exposure from that little digital marketing,
for sure,
and digital content manipulation. So I had the opportunity to meet some pretty incredible people during that time. I even did the early show. I was on World News Tonight, clear back when Peter Jennings was still alive.
Awesome.
Did Tech TV, KTLA on the West Coast, New York One on the East. So I was getting a lot of media exposure, and this company out of the middle of the country had seen some of that media, and they said, that's the guy we want to come run this new division for us. And so I was recruited to move out to Memphis. And that's where I got started in the industry that I'm in now and have been for 2 decades now. And that's the third-party billing, or helping community pharmacies take care of the patients that they serve.
That's a very interesting story. Obviously, experience it's the best teacher, as people say. Now, Breck, in your with ServRX, you've been basically driving revenue, driving millions of dollars, not every year, but every month. What keeps you motivated? What drives you to continue doing? You've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
What drives you to do that?
Well, ServRX is only a half of that time, right? So my first tenure in this space was about 12 years with the grandfather of our industry. How that came about was a consultant that was helping independent pharmacies be more productive and workflow and be more profitable through putting systems together. This consultant was down helping a independent owner, and he saw this shoebox sitting behind the counter, and it just had these invoices spilling out of it. And so he asked the owner of the pharmacy, he said, what is this shoebox? He said, well, that's my workers' compensation program.
Wow.
And the consultant
set aside.
Yeah. The consultant says, well, that doesn't look like much of a program. And he's like, yeah, no, I'll get around to billing it at some point in time. But I just don't have time right now. Well, consultant saw an opportunity, right?
Sure, of course.
And he steps in and says, well, let me figure this out for you. And that's how the industry was born. It then became a online adjudication, was all paper at first, and sending out invoices and having to gather up invoices from these independent pharmacies. But it became an online opportunity to do real-time adjudication, and that's how the industry started. Well, my love for taking care of those independent pharmacies, for 12 years, started to change by the acquisition and sale of the organization. We were bought and sold 4 times while we were there, and every time it changed just a little bit. And then the last sale was to a big PBM, a pharmacy benefit manager. Well, PBMs are a 4-letter word to community pharmacy. And so everything that I had built, all the relationships that I had built for 12 years. At that time, I was working with just about every pharmacy organization in the country. So almost 60,000 pharmacies were clients of mine.
Wow.
And personal friends. And now we were launching this new program with this PBM that was going to take away all of that profit that we were giving back to them. And so I had received a call from someone out here in Arizona that was looking for some billing help. And his name's Todd Delano. He and I were working on a contract to do third-party billing for his new little company that he was starting. And right at the 11th hour, I had to pull the contract from him. We couldn't finish helping him because we were making that transition from being a third party to a PBM. And so I had to take that contract back. Well, Todd's a smart enough guy and a serial entrepreneur. He didn't take no for an answer. So he's like, well, who else is doing this? And I explained that we'd pretty much bought up all of our competitors and rolled them up underneath our company. But I knew a chief architect that had retired, and I could make that introduction. I had a right-hand helper to me there in Memphis that was absolutely my go-to gal for everything. She was, disenfranchised with the direction the company was going, didn't have the same non-compete restrictions that I had as a director of the organization. And so Todd Delano likes to say that Stacy Elliott, my right hand, was my little baby Moses that I put in a basket and floated down the river to him here in Arizona. And that's how ServRX got started.
Wow.
And so, but even from the very early stages, I consulted and helped them get going. In fact, the namesake ServRX is even my name. And then I was able to join a couple of years later. I had a not only a non-compete, but I also had a TRO. I had a gag order so that I couldn't go tell our pharmacy friends what was happening to them.
Wow.
And so I had to lay low for a couple of years until that ran its course before I could join full time and then go tell the story. And that's one of the reasons why our growth has been so tremendous is that pharmacies wanted that service that was being provided by my former company, but it had gone away since they became a big, pharmacy benefit management group. So the sales process was pretty easy to just go recontact all of my friends and say, you need to do this. It's going to be better for you. So we experienced tremendous growth. We are probably working with maybe 1 out of every 8 pharmacies now nationwide that use our services. And the independents really love the program because they're watching every penny. And then the chains take a little longer to move. They're very big ships, and they have a lot of contracting. And in some cases, they even own their own PBM. So is it a conflict of interest for them to move to someone like us, where we're kind of anti-PBM in the sake of taking care of our pharmacies and their patients? Because again, talk about that patient having to wait around for 3 or 4 days to get their medication. Well, that's the alternative if they are underneath one of those pharmacy benefit managers.
Sure, and I'm sure you and my wife would have a lot to talk about. I think I mentioned to you, my wife's a pharmacist. She used to work for a large pharmacy chain. She still works for a large pharmacy company now, but so that's interesting. So
she may work for the pharmacy company that bought out my old company.
Maybe, probably.
I think we might have had that conversation.
I think we did. Interesting. So it's interesting. Obviously we've talked about the history of ServRX, but it's interesting how you've kind of detailed your relationship with ServRX. And the more I'm excited to kind of talk about this kind of next segment of this discussion is, so ServRX now has the Serve RTW, or the Serve Return to Work program. I'm really excited for you to tell us a little bit more about that and expound on that. Please tell us what this Serve RTW program is about.
Yeah, well, Chris, thanks for bringing that up, because that is the exciting thing that we're wanting to talk about right now, and how it came about was really through this whole pivoting during COVID, right?
Right.
So we work with workers' compensation patients, and people have to be at work to be doing their job, to have the pulls and the strains and the sprains that happen when you're working. And when COVID hit, fewer of those people were at work, and so claims started to drop. They started to decrease, and it depends on what report you're reading. It could be 20 million people out of jobs that made it so there were fewer people in the workforce. So we saw this decline, and at the same time, we're also sitting in on our industry calls with the National Community Pharmacists Association and National Chain Drugstore Association. And we're hearing about this pandemic, and we're hearing attorneys talk about, okay, we're essential businesses. We got to get ready. We got to, we're staying open. We're going to help patients. We're going to help our communities any way that we can. But now some of the questions of, well, what's our liability?
Exactly.
Now we're going to be open. We're going to be exposing our own employees to potentially be infected by this coronavirus. What's our liability? Or what if one brings the virus into work, and now all my staff has it? Now they're all out sick, or worse. How do I run my business? So there were a lot of questions around this, and we had been working with getting injured workers back to work in a timely manner already. Mm-hmm. We kind of had this sequencing process that we were, platform that we were using to kind of track and monitor the success. We thought, well, what if we tweak that a little bit and make it applicable to all employees, not just injured ones? Right. How could we make this be a COVID compliant, health screening process to mitigate some of that risk, also to catch infection or sick people early on, so that we're not having them come in and infect the rest of the organization. And so that's how we came up with this concept of ServRTW, or return to work. So it's an end-to-end solution. A lot of people have what they believe is a COVID compliant solution in place, but they may have one or two of the pieces, and it may not be a full end-to-end solution. What I mean by that is we're a healthcare technology company, right? So sure, we have to be HIPAA compliant, mm-hmm. Making sure that patient information is protected, all the PHI or patient health information. And as a HIPAA compliant organization, we every day see people that have a, I'm doing air quotes for you, have a COVID compliant program. They're taking somebody's temperature with a forehead scanner. That is not HIPAA compliant, nor is it social distancing, right?
That's correct. Well, it's very interesting you mentioned that. So I went to your office here in Phoenix, and I tried opening the door. It wouldn't open. And then I actually had to have my face scanned by this machine. It checked my temperature, and it has to turn green for me to go in. And it had to make sure that I had my mask on. I just find that technology amazing, how it really worked. I mean, really, the door didn't open. Just, because I didn't have my mask on. Tell us a little bit more about that technology, and how do you see that addressing this issue on pandemic? You mentioned, compliance issue, the risk of, one employee spreading that to coworkers. How does this technology kind of mitigate that risk, and, just the significance of this technology?
Yeah. So first it starts with the survey. All employees receive a daily reminder, mm-hmm. via email or text message, mm-hmm. or both. Okay. I turn it on for both for our employees. So they get an email and text message that reminds them to do their health survey. They just click on the link, fill out the survey. very similar to the survey that I filled out to come in here to speak with you today.
Right.
That has immediate responses, though, based on the questions. So they're automated. If somebody does have a symptom and they mark that they have that symptom, they get a notification immediately that says, stay at home.
Mm-hmm.
And it may give them some other directions. Here's some other helpful hints about tracking and monitoring your own symptoms. Here's resources for you to look to see if it truly is a COVID symptom. And their supervisor immediately gets a notification that says you have somebody that potentially has been exposed or may have a symptom of the coronavirus. If they have enough symptoms, it may say you need to immediately go be tested for the coronavirus. And here's a list of the approved testing sites, which, by the way, a lot of our community pharmacy partners are now testing sites too. So that's a really good match as well. So that's where it starts, is with the daily survey. You set that up as an administrator for each department so that the finance department doesn't have to get the sales department's notifications, and the operations people don't care about finance and what have you. They just are taking care of their own teams and following up with their own teams. You can use that for just employees that are actually coming back into the office or into the workplace. Or you can toggle the switch so that it just goes to all employees. I like to know even my home-based employees that are still working from home. I like to check on them as well. So I give them the survey also. But as an administrator, you could only have it turn on the survey just for those who will actually be physically coming in.
So, Breck, what kind of businesses or what industries do you think would benefit the most with this program?
Well, I think it's anyone that has an employee.
Okay. Sounds like...
we had our community pharmacies in mind. We were thinking of their risk mitigation and keeping them, compliant. But simply, if you have an employee that needs to be in a place of work, they should be doing some kind of monitoring. If not us, someone. There's a lot of solutions out there. We just happen to be extremely effective and very, very affordable. Some of the solutions end up being, as much as $50, $60, even $80 per employee per month. And that's even without any of the facial recognition and thermal imaging that you were mentioned earlier. That's just the health surveys and resources.
Right.
So, if you are a large employer like Walmart, who has 2 million domestic employees, that's $164 million in coverage for your employees. So we come in much lower than that, about $2 an employee instead of $80. So,
wow.
But to finish the whole end-to-end, once the survey is completed, the employee has notification that they're safe to come into work. They actually get a QR code. It's a different color every day, so it's real easy to see who's done their survey. You just say, "Hey, show me your QR code," and oh yeah, that's today's color. It's today's survey. But even before they can get into the building, like you had experienced, they present at our kiosk. This is the point of entry kiosk, and we searched all over the world for the right solution. We had seen some really cool technology, but it was very, very expensive. We first started with some just camera technology. It didn't do anything but some thermal imaging, and it was really high-end cameras. You've probably seen them on commercials, like I think Amazon shows one of those camera systems for their warehouse workers.
Right.
But they're like $10,000 for just the camera, and then you have to hook up all the systems and everything. We looked at some standalone kiosks, $35,000 or more. And we're thinking, how can small business afford this? And how can we help, boost our economy and get people back to work and be productive if they're having to lay out an arm and a leg just to get the system in place? So we found these kiosks, and the first system that we went with was just a reseller we were working with. They didn't know very much about the technology. It's Android-based operating systems that you can do some integration, but we were trying to get it connected to our card access for door entry, and we could never get the right answers for them. And so I went back out to the market looking again and looked and searched, and I finally found this company that does kiosks for a living. So they set up kiosks for trade shows, and they set up kiosks like when you go into a big business office and you want to know what suite your attorney is in. You have that touchscreen board that tells you, okay, they're on the 10th floor in suite 1001 or whatever, you know. So they do all of these things already and have all of these contracts in place already. And then thermal imaging attached to that was because of COVID. So they're another great company. You should probably have them on your show. They could tell you about the pivot they did from being kiosk provider to doing these thermal imaging and facial recognition. So we felt really good about not only the system that they had, but they also write their own software for it. So they're updating the system software constantly so that we have the latest and greatest things that are needed. And they have contracts with really large organizations that require that they go through extra steps and procedures to make sure that the hardware is free of any spyware or anything that shouldn't be there. So a lot of the components come out of China.
Right.
There's a lot of weird things that can come out of China.
We did have a long discussion about that.
Yep.
But, you know, Breck, what I find really interesting here and honestly amazing is just the ability you had to pivot. You mentioned that word earlier. The way that you pivot, not only was it timely, it was pretty significant because, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you're attacking this problem head on, and you're basically saving lives. You know, we've seen the damage, you know, over 200,000 people dead here in the U.S. And I really think that, you know, and people are taking this seriously, not to politicize or anything like that, but, you know, with the way you pivoted, what was that aha moment that kind of made you pivot? I mean, ServRX is doing pretty well. I know you mentioned there was a decline in revenue, but what was that thought that made you realize, you know, we got to make this adjustment, we got to pivot this way, and this is the right to work towards too?
Yeah, I think it was our love for community pharmacies and wanting to make sure that they didn't suffer during this time. Mm-hmm. Their own employees were protected, and then their businesses were protected. An independent pharmacy is working on razor-thin margins.
Right.
Their reimbursements keep going down more and more every year. Contracting is just brutal on them on trying to get a fair reimbursement for their medications. And so we knew all it would take was one situation could potentially put them out of business. They're frontline, they're essential businesses. They remained open, so they didn't have that, you know, potential loss of revenue, but they did have the potential for loss of life, as you mentioned.
Right.
Or their own internal pandemic where it wipes out all their employees, and now who's going to come, you know, work? We had one pharmacist in New York, in the Bronx, who has a cot. When we were all, you know, going home to do, you know, shelter in place and be, you know, quarantined at home, he was living at his pharmacy so he could take care of patients.
Wow.
So we had them in mind. And then we started to hear about these you know, lawsuits that were popping up. Some of the more well-known would be like McDonald's has a class action lawsuit against them right now. There's several employees that have all gotten together and they're suing McDonald's because they claim they were infected at work. Tyson Foods has a big lawsuit. Unfortunately, a butcher with JDS died, and now the family is suing JDS, a big meat packing company,
right,
over that. So we had all of these things in the back of our mind saying, how can we help? We've always been a risk mitigator for our partners, our pharmacy partners, and taking on that claim paying them up front. Now it becomes our responsibility to track down who really is the payer, and so risk mitigation was in the back of our mind. How do we help these community pharmacies? And then it just expanded from them. How do we help small business? How do we get the economy back on track?
Right.
How do we get businesses to reopen? And how do we improve consumer their want to go back to places, right? The consumer confidence is so low. Do I go to this restaurant? Are they clean enough? And we think, having one of our kiosks at the front door rather than a thermometer will build and instill a lot of confidence in consumers to say, these guys take it serious. They've got a thermal imaging facial recognition kiosk.
That's right. Well, again, what's really interesting here and amazing is, you had this, you made this pivot because of the love for your customers. And now, knowingly or unknowingly, the opportunity for this innovation it's just vast. It's huge. Like we spoke about, in the Philippines, my brother works for a large call center there. He's an AVP over there. He told me since everyone's working from home, their production actually went down by at least 15%. And that 15% KPI reduction, it equates to millions of dollars lost for that company. So I think, we talked about call centers as a good opportunity or, so they can actually operate again on site safely. And we've had that discussion. I'm just really impressed and amazed, the magnitude of the opportunity this has opened up. And it all started with the love for your customers. And I think it speaks a lot about you, ServRX, as you guys as entrepreneurs, as leaders, not just in the industry, but in our state, in our city. And man, kudos to you guys for putting this idea into action. First of all, you not only are you solving a problem, you actually found the problem and, attacked it and not just sat on it. What do you think is the most important concern to employers who are considering reopening? I know you've been doing some survey. We've been doing this survey, reaching out to different establishments, and I think you've gotten some pretty good response. What kind of response are you seeing as far as their, major concern?
Yeah, initially it was employee safety. So employee safety initially went off the chart on the survey for a lot of reasons, because, it was early on in the survey. People felt like that was probably the most PC answer too, right?
Sure.
Oh, we got to protect employees. But you think about it, your employees are your most valuable asset as an employer. They're also your most expensive asset. True. Okay, when you look at your P&L, that is your biggest expense is payroll, and so you need to take care of those employees. And you pointed, you made the point earlier, Chris, about how the productivity has gone down in your brother's company from the agents being home based instead of back in the call center. Everyone is experiencing that.
Probably higher than 15%.
There's been Wall Street Journal article about it. There's been Bloomberg article about it. Yeah, it is a big concern right now. Initially, we saw productivity increase, which was really kind of fun to see. Wow, people are super productive. Well, it was exciting. Not only was it exciting that they got this opportunity to work from home, they were excited they got to keep their job, because 20 million didn't get to keep their job.
That's right.
And so everyone knows somebody that was furloughed, laid off, just let go, business was just closed down. Everyone knows somebody that was in that situation. So initially, if you got to keep your job and got to work from home, it was exciting. And so people were putting their very best foot forward. We've been at this for 6 months now.
That's right.
It's gotten old.
Yeah.
And people have other responsibilities and other things that are kind of getting in the way, and so the productivity has gone down, unfortunately. So businesses need to get their employees back to their businesses safely.
And I think on top of that, obviously we just discussed on the side of the employer, but I think on the employee, I'm hearing a lot of people actually wanting to go back to office, and now you're hearing issues on mental health. This pandemic and this staying at home has taken a toll, with their mental health. What do you think is the most important to employees as far as they're concerned, going back to the office?
Yeah, I know that for our own employees, we have a flex schedule so that those that do feel comfortable to come back can come back. Those that are still having to deal with not having daycare or childcare for their families, it's hard for them to come back. But the number one thing that people want to know is that we do care about their safety. And where's the hand sanitizer? Where's the Clorox wipes to wipe down things and make sure that people are appropriately social distancing and wearing their mask in public areas. So the employees, our own employees, have been interested in making sure that it's a clean environment, and we're providing some of those extra things that are needed. We see that with other companies that we're surveying, we're talking to. And by the way, the next largest contributor to that survey is the consumer confidence. So the longer that we sit here, not being fully back engaged in going to restaurants, going to stores, going to retail,
right?
That's starting to really wear us down, and as a country and as an economy. And so that reinstalling consumer confidence and getting people back out spending dollars again is creeping up on employee safety pretty quickly now.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. Obviously it's a great program you have, end-to-end solution, keeps companies compliance, mitigates their risk. Do you have any competitors right now who are kind of doing the same or similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, there's a lot of competitors doing pieces of it, right?
Okay.
Maybe not the full end-to-end solution. The largest would be the big CRM company, Salesforce. So Salesforce, their software is pretty expensive. So you could imagine that whatever they're going to offer is going to be fairly expensive too, and it is. They have some great resources and they have a great survey platform, but that's about all that they offer. There isn't the point of entry security or anything with thermal imaging. We can set up an entire small business for the price of one subscription for
Right.
their program. And then we've also seen some other, some really exciting programs that are helping food industry, where they're, putting a sticker on the employee that they, have checked out COVID-free, and they're putting stickers on the takeout orders and things like that, saying that they've taken these extra steps and precautions. We love the concept and the idea, but we also think that there's probably some risk there, because what if someone does end up having coronavirus and they were wearing a sticker that says, "No, I'm certified that I don't have it." They could be up against some issues there with litigation. Litigation is going to be one of the most expensive things that comes out of all of this. We have a case study from an insurer, someone that covers small businesses. And the case study, is pretty staggering. That it costs about $125,000 to settle one employee suit.
Wow.
And that's not even the most expensive part of it. It also takes about 275 days of your time to settle that suit. And that's if you settle it. If it ends up going to court and you get a judgment, then the judgment goes up on average $200,000, and 25% of judgments are $500,000 or more. So you could put a lot of our systems in place for $125,000 for just one suit.
Well, saying goes, it's always better to prevent the fire than fighting it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think your solution's the best for it. So, Breck, last question here. There's a lot of struggling business owners right now, entrepreneurs. What advice would you give them as far as making a pivot, as far as pivot is concerned in this so-called new normal?
Yeah, I think that getting business back on track is actually having enough confidence to reopen and to start doing business again. And so I think once we see some of the economy start to pick up and dollars being spent in our small businesses, even the big credit card companies recognize it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see commercial after commercial now of, support your local small businesses. And so once we do start to all come back together and start supporting each other, you'll see some of those dollars free up and start to be spent around our community. We specifically started right here in our own community. We network with groups that are local right here in Arizona, and we offer a free trial to get people up and running again, just so that we can get their doors back open and get businesses back to business safely.
Well, Breck, it's really been a pleasure having you in the show today. And I think just to cap it off, for those business owners who's making a pivot, I think it's a great advice to really focus on your clients, just like what you guys did, what ServRX did, and identifying the challenges, the problem you looked into, again, went back to your love for your clients and look at this opportunity you've got into right now. It's pretty significant. So we are at the end of today's episode. Breck, what's the best way to contact you? What's the best way to learn more about ServRX and actually get in touch with you?
Well, you found me on LinkedIn, so
yes, sir.
So you always find me there. I'm the only Breck Rice that I know, but so it's pretty easy to find me there. But RTW for Return to Work, so rtw.servrx.com is our landing page. You can drop me a note there as well. But yeah, we're here to help. We do love our customers, Chris. So we're just launching a campaign to all of our national community pharmacies that we work with to help them out and make sure that they're secure. The other, preventative expense that employers need to worry about is if they have their own little epidemic within their own organization. If one person comes in and they transmit to 10 employees, now you have 10 employees out for possibly a month.
Wow.
If the average employee was making about $50K salary, that's a $41,000 plus to you as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even including the productivity or loss of productivity, right? So it becomes a very expensive thing if someone doesn't protect their business to make sure that their employees are COVID-free and the work environment is COVID-free.
Well, Breck, again, it's been a pleasure having you in the show today. Thank you so much for spending time with us. That concludes our show. This show was brought to you by GapTech Global, your outsourcing company for LinkedIn marketing and various back office services. You can learn more about their services at www.gaptechglobal.com. This has been your host, Chris Yap, of the podcast show From Zero to Revenue. As Stephen Covey said, all things are created twice, first in the mind, then in reality.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of From Zero to Revenue with your host, Chris Yap. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time.